So I downloaded it later that night, and after I hung up the phone after the interview ended, you could hear Kirk Cameron telling his buddy, "Ladies and gentlemen, we just got off the phone with a fool. Not our words, by the Bible's words." And then Kirk Cameron made fun of me for like the next 30 minutes, which, by the way, greatest day of my life. So now people are coming to the website, the eBay auction, like crazy, and they're bidding. And I'm trying to figure out who's doing the bidding, and I think I figured out, like, it was a bunch of Christians bidding that I go to whatever church they belong to, and a bunch of atheists bidding that I don't go to church at all, and they just started setting each other off. So by the time the last day rolls around, it's at like $300. So now I'm going to church every day for a month, and I'm freaking out. And, so it gets to Friday night, and I'm also worried because if you've ever sold anything on eBay, you know, like, if there's a popular auction there, no one bids until the very end, because everyone wants to be the last bidder, so they're not outbid. So I'm like, it's $300 now, how much higher is it gonna go? And like, with a minute left to spare on a Friday night, it jumped up to like 400, and then with 10 seconds left, it jumped to 500. And then someone snuck in there with a $504 bid just before it closed, and then it ends. And I'm like, oh crap, I just gave away every Sunday for the next year. And I'm trying to look at the email for whoever won, and it was like this guy, the email address said jim@offthemap.org. And I'm like, so I go, and Jim was the guy who had emailed me earlier in the week saying, are you serious about doing this? Because then I'll bid. And I told him, I was like, yeah, I'm serious about this. So I go to offthemap.org. This is about 10-15 seconds after this auction ends, and they have a banner headline on their website, "We won the eBay Atheist." I'm like, how did you do that so badly? And he tells me later, he's like, oh yeah, we knew we were going to win. We had the HTML all ready to go. So I talked to Jim, and I'm like, I guess I owe you 50 weeks of church. Here's what he tells me. He's like, I don't want you to go to 50 weeks of church. And by the way, Jim's from Seattle, Washington. He's like, I don't want you to go to 50 weeks of church. I'm a former pastor, and I don't want to go to 50 weeks of church. And he's still a Christian, but he's not a pastor anymore. He said, let me tell you about Off the Map and what we do. Here's what Jim does. He hates the way some Christians, evangelical Christians, will try to like be your friend, be your buddy, and they're like, hey, let's be friends, but really they just want you to go to their church or their retreat or something. He hates that. So what he does is he knows that a lot of churches try to reach out to people who are not religious. You know, they want to reach out to the lost. They want to reach out to the unsaved, unchurched people. So what he does is he goes outside a lot of these churches, stands on the street, and as people walk by, he's like, hey, do you go to church? And they'll say no. He's like, tell you what, if you go inside that church for the next hour, I'll give you 25 bucks. All you got to do is fill out this survey for me. And the survey has questions like, you know, did you like what the pastor had to say? Did you like the chairs you were sitting in? Was the choir good? Were you moved by this church? Did someone greet you at the front door? You know, just basically questions about, would you want to come back to this place? And they give Jim the survey afterwards, he gives them the money, they part ways. This is what Jim does. The unofficial slogan of Off the Map is helping Christians be normal. Jim then takes all those surveys and goes to the pastor and says, you guys want to reach out to people who don't go to church? Here's what they have to say about it. What are you going to do about it? That's what he does. In fact, how many of you listen to This American Life? A lot of you. They had a show like last October, November called Bait and Switch, where they talked about a lot of these stories about people who say one thing but really want something else. They actually interviewed Jim about his method of reaching out to non-Christians because it's so unusual. So Jim said, I don't want you to go to one church for 50 weeks. Let's make a deal. I pick the churches in Chicago that you should go to. I'll pick like 10 of them. You go to those 10 different churches and write about your experiences on my ministry's website, and we'll call it a deal. I totally was fine with that deal. 10 instead of 50, fine. So I started doing that. So I started going to like all these churches, and Jim had me going everywhere. I went to like Willow Creek, which is a mega church in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. I went to like an all-black church. I went to a guy's living room, because that's how big his church was. And I went to a bunch of different types, and I started writing about them on Jim's website. And in fact, that first day, the first church we decided to go to, that I was going to go to, was Old St. Pat's Catholic Church, because it was so close, and that was what I mentioned in the eBay auction. And actually, that reporter who said, I'll bite, what are you doing? She actually contacted me and said, wow, I can't believe the auction ended at $504. Listen, my editor wants me to do this story. Can I fly in Chicago to follow you as you go to church that first time? I'm like, yeah, that's fine. And I told Jim this, and Jim actually flew in too from Seattle. So we all went to Old St. Pat's together. And this is basically how that church visit went, and like all the church visits went. Like we went into Old St. Pat's Church. I know it's a Catholic church, not an evangelical church, but basically what I heard there, you had a priest talking about like this really amazing story. And he said, you know, I used to be a smoker, 2 packs a day for several years. And I knew it was bad for me, and I knew I needed to quit. And so one day I said to God, God, please help me like stop this addiction. Help me just break away from these cigarettes. And God gave me the power, and he said, you know, just stop. And so the next day I stopped, cold turkey. And I haven't smoked anything in 20 years. Now, forget the God thing. I think that's a pretty powerful story regardless. And it was really a touching story. And then as soon as he finished it, he got back into the, all right, now we're going to pray this, and now we're going to do this. And like whatever emotion and connection he had, lost, because he fell back into that script, you know? And I didn't like that. And the other thing we talked about is like, you know, in the Catholic churches, they do a lot of standing up, sitting, kneeling, those church calisthenics, so to speak. A lot of people were doing them, but they were always doing them like a beat before the priest said to do them. You know, like they were going through the motions without actually thinking about what they were doing. And that disturbed me too. So like, we met up, the reporter and Jim and I, we talked afterwards, and those are the things we talked about. I wrote up a little thing about it for Jim's website. And the amazing thing was, at that church and at the other churches I went to, because there were some good things about a lot of the churches and a lot of disturbing things about these churches, but whatever I would write, first of all, there would be a ton of people reading like this site, because the auction had generated some publicity, so people were reading Jim's website, and the comments were really good. If you had Christians writing, they would say, you know what, I really agree with you. I really hate it when people are just going through the motions instead of really feeling it. Or they would say, you know, you said this about the church. I think you're wrong there. Let me explain to you what's really going on. You had atheists saying they've gone through similar experiences, and that's part of the reason they left church. But it was a very positive dialogue. And if you've ever gone to any website that allows for commentary, that doesn't happen on the internet very often. So, I mean, it was pretty cool what was going on. So, I had done about 5 or 6 of these visits, and the reporter calls me up like a month after I started and says, all right, the story that I wrote is going to be in the paper the next day. So the next day, I go to check out this paper, and here's the front page of the Wall Street Journal. On eBay, an atheist puts his own soul on the auction block. And yeah, I'm thinking what you're thinking. Hey, his teeth are bigger than his face. This is really, really surreal still. And if you opened up the paper and saw the rest of the article, you saw a picture of Jim too. Again, front page of the Wall Street Journal. That's freaking absurd. And I just want to point out, look at the headline. An atheist puts his own soul on the auction block. Soul, as a metaphor for what I was really doing, because the word soul wasn't anywhere in the auction. I didn't sell my soul. I didn't do anything like that. But it's a cute metaphor for whatever I was doing. But the crazy thing is, when this thing appears in the Wall Street Journal, it goes everywhere. So all of a sudden, we're talking the same morning that I see this, I start getting phone calls from all sorts of people, and I don't know where they got my number from, and that still freaks me out. But like weird people, I mean, the Chicago Sun-Times call, they want to do a story. CNN, Anderson Cooper 360, Good Morning America, Fox News Channel. We had a guy from Harvard that I'd never heard of, he called just to talk. There was a game show, they're like, we need a panelist. Like, weird. So all this happens, the Chicago Sun-Times guy said, you know, we're just going to rerun the Wall Street Journal story in our paper, but we want a picture to go with it. Can we send a photographer out to you? Yeah, that's fine. And they're like, yeah, where can we take a good picture out by where you live? I'm like, well, the only thing near me is Old St. Pat's Church. They're like, okay, that works. And they're like, call up the church, see if they're available. I'm like, all right. So I call up Old St. Pat's Church, I'm like, hi, are you guys open? Who wants to know? Oh crap, they read the article. I'm like, no, just want to know if you're, no, we're closed. Fine, so the photographer takes some pictures outside the church, and then he's like, I wonder if they're really closed. So we go to open the door, it's open. And then he's like, how about the door to the balcony over there? It's open too. So we go to take a picture in the balcony, and no one stops us. So the next day in the Chicago Sun-Times, that's me in the Catholic Church, he sold his soul for just $504. So I just want to point out, I did not sell my soul. That's not what I did. They took a metaphor and like made it literal somehow, and that's not what happened.